I saw you crying during Jason when he was speaking. Why were you crying?
Well, because good is more powerful than evil.
Yeah. Don Keith here in Washington, D.C. with Lara Logan at the independent media event hosted by General Flynn and Eli Gold. Lara, you were so fiery and passionate today. Why are you so fiery and passionate about this subject of independent journalism and protecting it?
Well, people talk about your truth and my truth and all that nonsense, right? There's only one truth. And I've been a journalist all my life. I often tell people, I'm not sure I was born. It was more like I was fired, from as a missile. And I have been, like you have missiles that seek heat. I've been seeking the truth all my life. I wanted to know. I wanted to understand. I think we all want to be understood. So if you think about it, that underpins all of our relationships. It affects every part of our lives. In the workplace, whoever your private persona, your public personality, you always want to be seen for who you truly are if you're telling the truth, right? Unless you function on deception, in which case you don't want to be seen for who you truly are. And I believe that the truth is truly our salvation, because you can, of course you can be used, you can be misled, all of these things as a journalist, but what if you work to find the truth and you put ideology aside and you put parties aside and you put all of that aside, then you have the safety and security of knowing that truth never changes. Yeah. And people will say to you, Howard Dean, a Democrat politician, said to me once, well, that's not true. There isn't one truth. It depends on, how you were raised and what your skin color is and all these other things. I said, no, that's how you perceive the truth. And that affects the answers that you want, the response, or what you think should be done about it, and so on. But that's not the truth itself. There is only one truth. Like, we either stood here today or we didn't, right? We either talked about this or we didn't. And as journalists, we've been deceived in part into this idea that, well, maybe what about this and what about that? No, our job is to figure out the whole truth, not a little bit of it here and a little bit of it there. I mean, sometimes that's all you can get to, but being conscious of what you don't know is a nod to the whole truth, right? And that's probably one of the most important things I've ever learned in my life, and especially in my work as a journalist. Be conscious of what I do not know. So that shields me from being the big fat know-all, right? That goes out and paints myself as some kind of expert, and I know this and I know that. And if you're conscious of what you do not know, and you remember that as a journalist, you're always a student. You're not the expert in the room. You're a student, and you remember that there is only one truth, no matter what anybody says. And if you work to find that, then the rest of the stuff just doesn't touch you over time.
That's very nice. I like that. It's poignant. We talked about a lot of things today in this summit. We talked about independent journalism, how we can protect it, how we can preserve it. We talked about legislation to protect it. We talked about how independent journalists can get funding. Which of these concerns you the most, would you say?
Well, first of all, independent journalists need institutions to recognize them and their work. Like, I'm working on something called Press Club USA, which will first and foremost give people in the United States, independent journalists and from abroad, press credentials, like just a press ID. Because, I've had press IDs all my life. I've never had to deal with proving that I'm a journalist. But that's not the case for independent journalists. And if you look at something like January 6th, independent journalists who went into the Capitol on January 6th, many or most or all of them were charged, right? But journalists who were even freelance journalists who sold their footage to CNN, they were protected. And in this country, at least, you have the First Amendment. But in order to have the protections of the First Amendment, you have to be recognized as a journalist, because the Department of Justice and the New York Times treat you as a far-right activist. You now don't have that protection, right? So we recognize in this moment that our institutions have failed us. The National Press Club is not giving you a membership. if you're working for Lara Logan or Tommy Robinson or, that's not going to happen because these institutions no longer support journalism. They support ideology and partisan politics and whatever it is that they're doing. I don't know what it is. I don't know everything about it. There you are, being conscious of what I do not know. But I know for a fact what they're not doing. They're not doing their mission. They're not holding up their responsibilities. Okay, so where does that leave me? Well, I can whine about it. I can bitch about it. And I can expose it. Great. And now what? Because if I'm not going to work to fix it, who will? I can't expect the doctors and the lawyers or, I don't know, the dock workers and the grocery store attendant, right? They're going to fix it? Is it up to them? Is it up to the politicians? No, it's up to us. If you consider yourself a journalist, then what are your responsibilities both to your audience, to yourself, of course, and your family and life, but then beyond that, to the profession, because there isn't going to be a profession if we don't fight for it. And, think about who were the people that were the downfall of mainstream legacy media in the United States? How did that happen? That was an intelligence operation that was engineered, right, for their benefit. So they got all these reporters reporting stuff that's not true. Some people may be operatives, some people may just be ideologically invested. A lot of them are cowards, a lot of them are lazy, go with a lazy narrative. But what have they done? They've slit their own throats. But who benefits from that? Do you think that the people pushing those false narratives onto the media and putting their operatives within newsrooms, do you think that they wanted those institutions to truly be bastions of real journalism? No, so they get a tactical, immediate benefit on the battlefield, but they also get a strategic benefit. Because if you can eliminate all those institutions, right, if you can get rid of the idea of real journalism itself, then they've won. Because they don't want that.
They're like dummy journalists. They're not really journalists at all.
That's right. And, when you see, MSNBC, why did they feel it incumbent upon themselves to come out and explain their decision not to cover Donald Trump's rallies? Because there is a memory there of what real journalists are supposed to do. And they knew that they were derelict in their duty. Yeah. So they came and justified it. And for the rest of us, we're looking at them, they've been propaganda for so long. Like, we don't even consider that real journalism. It's just crap, quite frankly. But it's more than crap because it's targeted information that is designed and intentionally released with a purpose to affect outcomes, right? To have, in information warfare, they talk about first, second, third order effects, or in warfare in general, they talk about that. But it's particularly relevant with information because why are you putting out that propaganda? What are you covering up? What are you trying to engineer? What narratives are you installing? How are you manipulating people's behavior, right? So everything is with intent. And so what I think a lot of these journalists today are co-conspirators in this conspiracy to undermine the United States of America because they have now been exposed to the truth for years and they've still disregarded it. So it was one thing in the beginning. I would say I might have been guilty of that if the White House told me something or the head of the Intelligence Committee, said something. The truth is, journalists don't fact check that most of the time, especially not in daily media, because you have that cover and protection. Oh, it was the White House saying it. They must be true, right? Or is the FBI? This is their official statement. That must be true. And so you don't have to fact check that to the same degree as if you're out on the streets talking to someone, or you're investigating a story and you got to know what they're saying. So if you gave them the benefit of their office and you gave them the benefit of the doubt and you gave them a degree of credibility and trust in the beginning, that's one thing. But you now have at your disposal their testimonies under oath where they were saying something completely different. So what is your excuse now? And why have you never apologized for what you got wrong? People actually suffered because of the lies about COVID. People died because of that. There were kids and spouses that were beaten to death in their homes under lockdowns across the world because they couldn't escape the abusers. There were elderly people who slipped into early dementia because they were in solitary confinement. And where is the apology for that? Where is the reckoning? There hasn't been one. And in fact, in many cases, they've doubled down on their lies. They're still reporting. They're still trying to sabotage any effort that the Trump administration may have to work with Russia to resolve I don't know, issues like a war that's killing millions of people, because it's not about the truth. It's about pushing an ideological position and engineering an outcome that they desire.
So, what do you say to the little girl who wants to be the next Lara Logan without selling her soul? How does she go about doing it?
Well, first of all, I would say the most important thing is that same thing I've always said to people who've come to me. I want to, do you want to be a journalist or do you want to be the next Lara Logan? Because that's an awful thing. I mean, it's an awful thing to aspire to be someone. It's what is real journalism about? If your aspiration is to do that, there will always be a home for you. There will always be a role and a place for you, and it's something that really matters, right? But if you're trying to be someone else, be yourself. Don't aspire to be. Now, I can tell you about lots of people that I looked at in the media world, and I was like, I want to do that, and I want to be able to do that, and I want to do that as well as that person has done it, and I want to learn from them. That's really important. But you're nothing if you don't know who you are.
And how do you have the freedom to do that?
And you'll never hold on to your soul if you don't know who you are.
True.
Never.
Yeah.
Your soul is for sale to the highest bidder because you haven't even figured. You've probably sold it before you even knew that you did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how do you do that? Well, I had the benefit of having, of being loved. I was loved from the moment I was born. My mother loved me. I didn't have an idyllic childhood in some respects. My parents got divorced when I was very young. Lots of steps and half sisters and and all of that. But that foundation of love that comes for people who've been loved all their lives, I think we're very lucky. So find love. Be loved. Obviously, that begins with. I don't want to say the cliche of love yourself, but I do mean that you have to at least be at peace with yourself in order. If you don't love yourself, well, how do you ask somebody else to love you? Now, that doesn't mean not being humble and not knowing your own limitations and not working on yourself. Of course, those things are natural. But people would find it weird that they'd come to me to talk about a job, and my answer is, I don't care where you went to school. I don't care how many degrees you have, how many languages you speak. That's practical. I need to know that because what you can do in the world of journalism is often defined by your ability to communicate, right? And so those things are important. But what I really want to know is, who are you? Because if you don't have integrity, true integrity, if you don't have real moral courage, we're just not going to be able to do a lot together. Because I can't go into battle without that. And every day is a battle. Every day is a fight, right? Every single day. So you probably saw in that room, there were a lot of different people that had a lot to offer. And I mean, Jason Jones, unbelievable what that man knows about the cartels and cartel operations in the border and everything else. Given up everything. Given up everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the nights when Jason's calling me from his trailer down on the border and he hasn't slept for I don't know how long, and he's like, can you microwave a can of mushrooms?
I saw you crying during Jason when he was speaking. Why were you crying?
Well, because good is more powerful than evil.
Yeah.
And God is more powerful than all. That's why, because that man, he gave up absolutely everything, and he's a strong, he's a alpha male type of guy, and for him to put his whole life in storage and live on nothing, and you'd never have known it, by the way, if you knew him through those years, and he fought to designate the cartels as terrorist organizations for 8 years. And you know what he did too? He went to police departments all across this country to warn them that the cartels had transformed into the most violent and powerful criminal organizations on earth and terrorist organizations, and to equip and arm young men that sign up or young women that sign up for a police force somewhere who have no idea that just because you're thousands of you're miles and miles away from the border across the country, but what you're really fighting in your town are these organizations. They're the real power, and they didn't even know it. You know, and it's just, to me, it's a truly amazing and beautiful and wonderful thing when you see what one person can do from nothing, right? But those, you have good in your heart and in your soul. You know who you are. You know the difference between right and wrong. You know there's only one truth, and nothing's going to stop you. And I just know how many years Jason struggled. And it's not only him. Angela Stanton King, who spoke up there. I mean, Angela, they pressured her in prison to abort her baby. Pressured her. Can you imagine a young girl that's been violently and sexually abused, has not been born with any of the typical, sort of, she doesn't come from a powerful family or an influential one or a stable one, or, she's, like I said, I was loved from birth. Was Angela loved from birth? And what she overcame, and now she's saved over 90 babies from being aborted. She always says that,
She was instrumental in getting the legislation passed, was she not?
Yes, because when she was in prison and she refused to get an abortion eventually, she gave birth chained to the bed with the sheriff standing over watching. And because of her and that story that she ended up telling, she didn't want to go and see President Trump when she was asked to. Go and tell him her story in his first term, because of all the hatred and division that is created, right? She didn't want to. She was like, and she said, "Why, God, are you sending me into the arms of a white supremacist?" And of course, what did she discover? That none of that was true. None of it. And in fact, the man that changed the law, and he moved mountains to make that right. Because he listened, he didn't see her walking through his door as, oh, here comes a black woman. No, he saw, oh, here comes a woman I was told I need to know what she has been through, because we as a nation, we as human beings, we can't allow this to happen. And I have the power to change that. And I'm going to use it. And he did. And of course, there's all these people that don't want you to know that. Right? They don't want you to know that Trump has any good in him, because that's going to make it very hard to argue that he's, Satan himself. And Angela has gone on from that, to save other children. She always says that no child should die because their parents don't have a bank account and don't have any money. And you start to think about that, because you're a young girl, oh, women's rights and my body, my choice, and no one's going to tell me I have to have it. And then you start to realize, okay, wait a minute, like, there are people that literally, they take that life because they're poor. And that is an awful, awful thing for us to have as a society. So I would just say to people, if you're young and you're considering being a journalist, you should know that that the rewards are great. And I don't mean, I'm not talking about being famous. I'm talking about that, I've slept on the street with street kids in Angola, and listened to them and held them, and what was that one night? Maybe that's nothing. Maybe, it means nothing. But maybe that child for that one night felt warm and loved.
Lara, Logan,
and
you're
understood.
an incredible patriot. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to give you a hug. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Yeah. God
Beautiful.
bless you.
Beautiful.